So, as y'all know, a lot's been going on lately. It's like the ancestors are speaking from the grave. We've had two fires and one Confederate museum destroyed. And now, here comes fire number three. And look, I'm not blaming Annabelle this time. This ain't ghosts. This is bigger than Annabelle. This is our ancestors at work. And this time, the flames touch land tied to a woman named Hortense Prout. And trust me, you need to hear her story. Let's go back to 1861, right as the Civil War was kicking off. And I know what some of y'all are thinking. Wait, this happened in D.C. It's not the South. And you're right, D.C. wasn't the South, but that doesn't mean it didn't have slavery. D.C. was in the weird middle ground, not quite north, not quite south, but still very much a slave city. They had slave pens just blocks from the capital, and over 3,000 enslaved people living in the city in 1860. Yes, the North had slavery too. The big difference is the North had smaller farms, cities, and fewer enslaved people. But make no mistake, it was still slavery. The South had more land, harsher conditions, and relied way heavier on enslaved labor for agriculture. But DC, it had its own system of oppression, and Hortense was stuck right in it. Hortense Prout was just 20 years old, enslaved on a 56-acre estate in what's now Adams Morgan. The land was owned by a man named John Little, who ran a butchery, a tannery, and a cattle farm. He had 13 enslaved people, including Hortense, her mother Delilah, and her siblings. Now, here's where it gets bold. Hortense decided to escape. She put on men's clothes, which was a major risk in itself, and made her way toward the Union troops nearby. Because even though DC still had slavery, she knew the Union was the side fighting against it. Now pause for a second. How did she know that? There was no Facebook, no CNN, no Freedom Hotline. That means people were talking, word was spreading, enslaved folks were sharing information, probably whispering in kitchens and over fences. If you can make it to the Union, you might be safe. Hortense made a run for it, but she was caught. They threw her in jail for 10 days and then sent her right back to John Little's land. Now, here's the part that hits different. Less than a year later, in April 1862, President Lincoln signed the Compensated Emancipation Act, which freed all enslaved people in D.C. So yes, Hortense was legally freed. And that's the key difference between the North and the South. In D.C., when the act passed, freedom came immediately. But in the South, whew, that's where Juneteenth comes in, because down in Texas, enslaved folks didn't find out they were free until June 19, 1865, 2.5 years later. Some folks say it was by accident, but let's be real, they didn't tell them on purpose, because free labor, yeah, they wasn't ready to get that up. So what happened to Hortense after emancipation? We don't have full records of her life, but we do know that her mother, Delilah Prout, stayed in a cottage on that same land. She even shows up in the 1870 U.S. Census, still living in that area, but free. The estate was eventually abandoned and turned into what we now call Kalorama Park. And the beautiful thing? That park is now part of the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom, a program by the National Park Service that recognizes real places tied to Black resistance. So while Hortense didn't get a statue or a parade, she did get a marker in the park, a permanent reminder that she fought back. So yeah, a fire happened, but that fire didn't just destroy a building. It lit up a story we should have been talking about all along. Hortense Prout didn't go viral. She didn't have followers or fame, but she ran, she resisted. She made a move when it could have cost her everything. And if you listen closely, real close, through the ashes, through the smoke, through the silence of history they tried to erase, you can still hear the ancestors whispering, "We're not finished." And that's why we got to keep telling our own stories, because if we don't, they'll get buried, renamed, whitewashed, and erased, just like this building. So if you're with me, help keep this story alive. Comment, like, and share. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that they won't put in your textbook. Peace.